In this video, we're gonna create this Viking scene from scratch in Blender. So I started off just adding in a plane and subdividing that in edit mode. Then I went straight to the sculpting tab and used dynamic topology to start sculpting out the scene. So this is gonna be the ground plane for the kind of harbor or Viking city that will be in the background of the scene. So I'm just using different sculpting tools here really and just building out the terrain. I wanted it to look kind of random, so I went back and removed some parts of it as well, even used the smooth brush. So here's the geometry. What I did then was just unwrap it and give it this ground texture right here. And then I just played around with the scale of the texture. I might change that later, but that's good for now. So I'm just adding in a cylinder and remeshing it using voxel remeshing. Then I want to decimate it to like 0.2 to remove most of the geometry, but get this kind of random geometry shape. Then I'm just using proportional editing to make the shape a bit more random. I'm unwrapping that and giving it a wood texture. And already you can see it's looking pretty good, but I tried a different unwrapping method and I like that much more. So I'm just moving the UVs to get different parts of the texture to add some variation. And then I'm creating this roof module right here. So using the same method, just remeshing and decimating, then I'm giving it this grass texture, duplicating it, giving it a different texture, and now I'm gonna reuse this geometry for the wall part as well. So once that was done, I really just started building it out like Legos. So I'm just moving these pieces around and placing them in a way that makes sense. And you see I made the walls have some jagged edges to give the illusion of the planks overlapping in the corners. I don't know, it looked fine in the final render, so I just went with that. I'm just creating different pieces when I realize I need them, just duplicating and editing them to fit the building. So I created 3 different houses. Then I just moved it to a new collection and called it houses. To actually scatter the houses around the ground plane, I'm using a hair particle system and choosing render as collection. Then I can just select my houses collection and you can see they automatically scatter across the plane like this. I had to rotate them so the rotation was correct, and I'm just making sure that the bottom of the houses is at the origin of the object, so they will stand on top of the ground and not sink into it. Then I'm selecting these vertices in edit mode and putting them into a new vertex group, and then I'm using that vertex group to drive the density of the hair system. So now I can control which parts of the plane will be covered with houses. And then I'm just creating this burnt down house, and I'm gonna put that into the collection as well. So I think it might look cool with the flames and everything added later. So I'm just using the sticks and a door. So to prepare for making the ocean, I just stretched out the plane a little bit. Then I'm adding in a plane and giving it an ocean modifier. So now I'm just placing it to the middle here and bringing this part of the plane down to allow for the waves to not clip through the ground. And now I'm just animating this time variable here on the ocean modifier to make the waves actually animated. Then I thought it would be cool if we had some kind of wooden bridge that went out into the water. So I just created this one piece using one of the doors and some sticks, and I just placed them kind of randomly like this and tried to make it look like an old bridge or a pier. So I added some more variation using the proportional editing tool, and then I just joined them into one object and started placing them around the scene like this. And then I started working with the water material, and I changed this many times throughout the project, but I started off with just bringing down the roughness to 0 and actually bringing the metallic up to 1. Then I wanted to give it some more detail, so I added this bump node and plugged in a Musgrave texture to give it some bump detail, and that just brings a little bit more realism in my opinion. And at this point I started working on a foam material, but I ended up scrapping that at the end of the project anyways, so I'm not gonna go through that. Then I made this rock and duplicated it around the environment a bunch of times. Then I started working on the boat, so I'm just adding in a cube and using the mirror modifier to model the basic shape of a Viking ship. So I'm just extruding these pieces out and creating this nice curvature right here. Then I'm giving it some subdivision and just adding loop cuts to refine the shape. Then I gave it a solidify modifier and made a seam right here and then just unwrapped it so the wooden texture kind of wraps up at the ends like that. Then I reused our sticks to create a mast and also a couple of boards to sit on. I'm not an expert on boats, but I just added some random details. Please go easy on me in the comments. And then to make the actual sail, I just added in a plane, gave it a cloth texture, subdivided it a bunch of times. Then I extruded the edges like this and selected these points right here, as well as the top. Then I created a new vertex group, named it pin, and assigned those vertices to that group. Now that I add a cloth simulation to the plane, I can select my pin group for pinning, and as you can see, that will make those points stay in the same place. Then I'm just playing around with different force fields. I'm using a wind force field as well as a turbulence force field, and I'm just playing around with those settings until I get something that I like. Opening up an entirely new Blender scene, I'm adding in an icosphere and subdividing that. Then I'm gonna use the quick smoke preset, and I'm just changing the resolution to be a bit bigger, so I'm going with 64. And as you can see, I'm just trying to get a nice fire element here. I'm decreasing the reaction speed and also adding some randomness to the emitter using a noise texture. Once I baked the simulation and baked some noise on top of it, this is what I got. I think it looks pretty good, so I tried rendering it with an transparent background and importing it as planes into my scene. But that didn't really cut it for me. And then I realized I could export it as an OpenVDB sequence, and that allows me to duplicate it a bunch of times without losing too much playback speed. I'm going back to my Viking scene and just hitting Shift A and import this fire element like this. Then I'm just placing it around the scene where I think there should be some fire. And as you can see, I'm switching back and forth between rendered mode and layout mode just to see what kind of effect I'm getting. And I went back to add more fire later, so that was just like a first fire pass. Going back to the boats, I tried to figure out a way that I could have them kind of ride on top of the water and not just go in a straight line. So I duplicated my water and decreased the resolution of that ocean modifier. Then I added in a new plane and shrink wrapped it to the low poly water surface. And as you can see, when I animate it to go forward, it kind of glides along the surface like this. So now if I parent this boat to the vertices of that plane, it should follow the water pretty nice like this. And of course I just hid the low poly ocean and only showed the high poly one in the final render. So now I just went back and added some more ropes and other details to the sail, just to make it look a bit complex. I actually went back and added even more off camera, but you get the idea. Make it look more like a Viking ship, I just modeled a simple oar and a shield, and then I placed that around the sides like this. So I thought it would be fun to make some Vikings, so I took this old model that I made in another video, just modified the shape a little bit, and then texture painted this Viking dude on top of it. And then I made a vertex group for the hair, and I used the hair dynamics settings to simulate some dynamic hair, and I just played around with those settings until I got something that looked good. Then before I added in the people, I just wanted to duplicate the ship, and I also wanted a burning ship in the background, so I used the same model for that. Then I just imported my Viking and parented him to the boat like this. Then I got distracted and made some smoke, the same way I did the fire, and just imported that to the scene. Then I went back to the people and started duplicating them, and just posted them differently each time, so it looks a bit random. Then I took the same smoke that I used for the smoke plumes and just stretched it out to cover the entire background, so that kind of gave this atmospheric background fog thing. I don't know, it looked pretty good in the final render. So yeah, I went for it. I'm just going back and adding in some more fire and placing the smoke pretty much everywhere where it's burning. Then I have this big cube that covers the entire scene that has this volumetric material. So I just played around with the different densities for that to give a volumetric effect with the lighting and all that stuff. I actually grabbed the same smoke plumes and repurposed them to be kind of smoke gliding along the water surface in the foreground. That made it look just a bit more dynamic. I did decide to change from cycles to EV somewhere here in the end because my GPU ran out of memory and I didn't feel like doing any optimization. time, so I just had to take some time to make the fire look good in Eevee. But then, finally, it was ready to render. So I just added some color grading and a little bit of a rain overlay on top. I'm really happy with how it turned out, and I hope you guys found this video useful or at least inspiring or fun. Yeah, so let me know if you like this format or if you want more normal tutorial videos. This was really fun for me to make, so I really hope you liked it. Yeah, if you're new to the channel, I upload videos about VFX and simulations in Blender, so if that's something you like, you may want to consider subscribing. I got the sound effects in this video from Upbeat, and to be honest, they don't have that many sound effects, but I found that the ones they had were super good quality, and to be honest, in my opinion, it's just nice to have fewer options to pick from. So you don't have to sit there all day and browse through endless libraries. So yeah, if you want to check out the sound effects, I'm gonna leave a link in the description, and it will also be a good way for you to support the channel if that's something you want to do, because I am partnering with Upbeat for these videos. Yeah, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.